I'm Nathaniel Holmes. Presenting today with me is Kyron Pagulayan. I'm joined by Marshall Isbell, another trainer at CSIS, and Slyman Ahmed, a trainer as well. And of course, we have Martha and all her expertise. She's our director, our officer here in client services. So she will jump in and answer the more difficult questions that Kyron and myself may not be aware of. So we do encourage participation. We do encourage questions via the chat, and that's about it. Let's see where we go. Okay, so the target audience. Training, even though it's a webinar, is designed for data coordinators. Because we know many of our SEDS data coordinators do not have access to Bridge because of our licensing, we do want to make sure that you guys are aware of all the data that's available. And you're a specific group in which Martha has encouraged us or directed us to make sure that we have a webinar, right? So feel free to interact and ask your questions. And then Marshall indicated several of you were new, right? And so this is a great training if you're new to CALPADS. This is perhaps your first opportunity to go through the certification process, which is probably a vital element in ensuring that the data reported is accurate. And so we'll talk about specifically the certification process. And then any other stakeholders, right? Sometimes we get administrators from the county, administrators for a district or a charter school that are not necessarily submitting data to CALPADS, but it's a valuable training for them to come to. While they can't come to all the various CALPADS trainings, the reporting and certification trainings will identify or help them understand what specific data is being collected, what are the windows and deadlines and the time frame. So if you're not necessarily a data coordinator or anyone that submits data to CALPADS, it's still good for you to attend the training. I think you will learn some valuable information. And so this slide's very important, right? It's our training sequence, and it's an opportunity for us to set the expectation for what will be covered today. And so highlighted, you can see the title of today's training, Fall-1 Reporting and Certification. Those of you who go to advanced, you see the second bullet says advanced, know what that is. But for those of you who are new or who don't have access to Bridge, Slyman does an advanced training 3 times a year for each submission cycle. And it's a condensed version of what we cover in reporting and certification. It's for those who only need updates and changes. This is a more extensive, it's a little bit longer. And so since we're talking about Fall-1 under data collections, and that's the focus today, it's important for you new people to understand that this training will be based on the information that you would have learned in the CALPADS Introductory Data Coordinator Orientation Training, and then the CALPADS Submission Training. So the second kind of tree branch or the second column, you can see that there's CALPADS Basics and then Fall-1 Student Data Population. We'll talk about where you can find recordings now of those trainings, okay? Because we currently have finished doing the live version. And so also important is understanding how training is delivered. We used to really say, do this, do that, kind of more specific direction to the functionality. And we're trying to get away from that. CALPADS functionality grows, it changes. The data is often used differently depending on how legislation change. So what's very important is that you, the data coordinator, can exhibit or master specific skills. And so we've worked on the rubric and we've identified skills that successful LEAs have. This training is specific and supports these 4 skills in front of you: coalition building, data leadership, project management, and critical thinking. And so when we talk about what we mean by coalition building, you're going to work and have to connect several people across your data ecosystem, right? And we use the term data ecosystem because CALPADS is not the sole source of information, right? You have a student information system and a special education data system that submit data to CALPADS and perhaps extract data from CALPADS. CALPADS interacts with state files for LPAC, assessment, identifying who's foster youth and direct certification, right? You have nutrition systems. We don't want to just focus on, right, meeting deadlines in terms of assessment and accountability. Ultimately, the goal is to have a team of personnel inside and outside of your district. You may work with the county office, you may be working with the CELPA, but ultimately all the data that's collected is supposed to be leveraged to benefit the students, right? Data is data until you use it effectively, then it becomes information. Once you use it locally to make decisions, it's information, right? So it's very important along those lines of being kind of a gatekeeper of information to exhibit data leadership. And, we realize throughout the state, there's various positions in which someone is submitting data. Sometimes it's the head of a charter school. Sometimes it's a registrar in the office. Sometimes it's district personnel. And so you all have different levels of leadership built into your role within your organization. But because you're a data coordinator and you may be the point person for CALPADS, it's incumbent upon you to understand that you're going to have to initiate and organize education throughout your LEA. While we here at CSIS are willing to support anyone who asks for it, we have limited staff. And so you're going to have to prepare data. You're going to have to train folks so that they know what's coming and they can assist you in your job. Let's hope nothing happens to any one of you, but every year something happens. Emergency comes up, life takes over, and someone has to step in, and you want to make sure that your district or charter school is prepared for that. You want to be able to plan ahead of time and make sure the stakeholders can provide you with information so that it can be reported and then they can see the results before the deadline, right? And along with that, it requires the development of local procedures. You want to be able to set systems in place so that in your absence, your district can still report to CALPADS successfully and that you can get the information in a timely manner. And it's not even year in, year out. It's ongoing, it's continuously, right? Students enroll all the time. The enrollment procedures should collect all the information needed to build a student's profile in CALPADS. And so as you're forecasting CALPADS information based on state deadlines, you have internal needs as well. And so this was going to require project management, right? You can't wait until October 6th, Census Day, to submit your data when snapshot reports are running. You need SSIDs, you need to submit student information so you can start getting students identified, whether they're free reduced lunch or perhaps they're English learners. And so there's an immediate necessity for data and information all the time. And so you have to be able to plan your submissions, your data uploads, and schedule them based on your schedule, based on your LEA schedule. And this should be in advance. The CALPADS deadline should be old hat for anybody who's done this for several years. If you're new, that's what you're going to work towards, right? It may be a challenge meeting your first deadline, but you're going to take what you learn and try to plan so that you can collect the data, have it submitted in advance of the deadline. So you want to create a calendar, a plan, you want to hold meetings, you want to send emails so that the biggest roadblock is getting data into CALPADS that's clean. And so you can't do any of these three things without critical thinking, right? Because critical thinking requires you to, assess the need and make decisions, right? You have to review data for completeness. You have to be able to solve problems with analytical mindfulness, right? You have to kind of examine. You can't look at things on the surface level. You have to figure out what are my program deadlines and timelines, right? Because while we're submitting data for CALPADS, there's a practical real world purpose and a lot of times for the data, right? We don't want to test EL students for CALPADS and LCFF funding. We really want to get them tested so they can be provided the appropriate services. And so when you're creating your timeline for enrollment and submitting data to CALPADS and getting SSIDs, you want to consider all the factors along with that process. Likewise, if you have a stumbling block, if you have a submission error, you want to be able to access those resources, but also submit service requests to CALPADS, right? You want to develop a level of independence and be able to analyze simple errors on your own, but you also want to know when perhaps CALPADS isn't has a known issue at the time, or perhaps you need further assistance, right? There's something maybe undocumented, right? And so these, again, are the 4 skills that we hope to kind of help you with today: coalition building, data leadership, project management, and critical thinking. And so although we have a new focus, our objective ultimately is the same. We want you to be able to identify the data and reporting requirements for Fall-1, perform the certification process, resolve certification errors and anomalies, and then ultimately, we want you to be able to approve the reports required by Fall-1, whether you're an LEA or a CELPA. And so we have objectives. We have a skill-driven delivery method, but we also have expectations. And, basically, this slide can be summed up in our expectations is that you have a familiarity with the resources, not just where they're located, but kind of what each resource is good for and when to go to it. And so we're going to pause the PowerPoint for a moment, and I'm dragging in front of you my web browser, right? And so we're just going to cover where these resources are located. As we go through the training, we'll try to find examples how to show you to use specific resources. And so here is our CSIS homepage, right? And if you need to sign up for Bridge, you have the learning link here. A great resource if you want to find any PowerPoint that we're presenting off of, you can ask us, we'll provide it in the chat, but you have the resources. Any historical PowerPoint you can find in the resources. A lot of times when we help the CDE host one of their trainings, we'll put their PowerPoint in this resources. So it's a good place to expand and kind of look. And then if you need help in the future, right, you have a way to get to the CALPADS FAQ. Every Wednesday at 3 p.m., you could come here and click the link, and it will take you to the Q&A. If you need a specific training for your organization, you can go to instructor-led training, communicate with Martha, and we can figure something out for you all. Another great resource that everyone who interacts with CALPADS has to be aware of is the CALPADS system documentation page. But more so than just this page, it's the CDE's web portal. And so you can see all these links here are specific to CALPADS. You have a communications, right? And so all your flash messages, anything that's recently changed or is upcoming will be announced in the flash message. You can see the most recent one is from this month, September 7th. Every year you have a back to school letter that provides information about things to come. And then you have archive. So if you want to go back and see when something was implemented or changed, you could look at the archive communication. And then one last thing we're going to look at here is the CALPADS calendar. And so you don't have to wait for us to announce a lot of times what the deadlines are. When this calendar is updated, you can come here and check out and see, like, for instance, the amendment window ends on January 28th. But if you're planning for Fall 2, you can see that the Fall 2 schedule's here, as well as end of year. Then we have a great resource. Kyron, who's presenting here in just a few minutes, manages the CALPADS user manual. He's really taken the responsibility of keeping it updated. It's probably the best place to go as a means of a collected source of information. So here you're looking at the Fall-1 reporting roadmap. So if you're new, you want to Google CALPADS user manual. On the home screen, you just scroll down a little bit and you see Fall-1 roadmap. You can see he's included the calendar, a checklist of things that is coming soon, the suggested milestone slides to help you make your plans, the back to school letters included. You can see several recent flash updates. Here's some information about your submission. It's a great resource if you're new to become familiar. And so that roadmap, if you're very new or someone's new and you're a veteran, send them here. It'll help them get started. But it's not just limited to a roadmap. If you need functionality instructions, you can see that it's extensive, right? But as you get your fingers wet and you're doing enrollment, you can see there's SSID enrollment details. If you're working on your student's demographic, you have student information details, right? And so we know some of us prefer to watch a video as opposed to read, right? That's fine, right? I prefer to read as opposed to watching a video, but we all learn differently. So we do have detailed videos of instruction available, even if you don't have access to Bridge. And so there's a Figmet CSIS training channel. If you just type in CSIS training channel, you get here, but you want to go to CSIS training. And so you have the weekly Q&As, right? Hosted by our analysts, supported by CDE and Brandy and Joe. And then you have what's particular for today is you have the Fall-1 data population training. So if you're brand new, you have all the different submissions that are related to Fall-1, from enrollment to students with disabilities. You have the basics. So if you've never submitted a file to CALPADS, you have the batch file submission. If you've never certified and Kyron's demo's too fast today, you have the certification process, snapshot and revision. And then if you have errors along the way, we have videos specific to that, right? How to use documents, like the error list, and then certification errors and validation error video. So it's another great resource for you on this. We could kind of point out what's useful along the way, but that's plenty of time on that. And so if we're thinking about what we're going to do today, we're going to go over overview. I'm going to try to make it brief because the introduction was quite lengthy. Then Kyron's going to take over and talk about the data submission, different elements. And along those lines, he's going to go over the student subgroups, the important data that's going to be featured on the reports. And Kyron's going to talk about the certification process. Along the way, I often interrupt him because I feel like he's privileged to talk too long and I want to hear myself talk. So I'll chime in when I can. And then I will come back to recover reports and wrap everything up.